UFC 268, Usman Covington 2. Rose was fighting Wei Lee. But right now we're going over the prelims. So let's get to it. Get my partner Harrison on here.
For sure, man. And let's get to it. So we got Edmen Shahbazyan, plus 100 on the 11th ranked middleweight, which on this show, we've been pretty on the Shahbazyan is overrated bandwagon.
The hate train.
But at one point, this guy was one of the highly touted, young guys, and he's like the classic example that makes people not get too excited about young, hot prospects. Like, he's the classic guy that people are talking about when they're like, oh, I've seen young, hot shot prospects come and go. Whenever, like say a Hamzat naysayer or just anybody that doesn't like, starting hype trains up, they'll be like, oh, I've seen young prospects come, get hot, and leave. And, I feel like that's, a guy like Shahbazyan is kind of like what they're all alluding to, or at least he fits that template. But he's fighting Nassourdine Imavov, and he's a minus 120. So there's another example of rankings being questionable, of how Imavov is unranked, but is the small favorite over the 11th ranked guy, just like we saw with Hamzat versus Jane Liang.
Man, I don't even want to and this is no discredit to Shahbazyan. This is just an honest question to you. All right, outside of what you think of him as a fighter. All right, so take him out as a fighter, and just think about it this way. And I just want to know what you think.
Okay.
The gym he fights out of is the same one that Ronda Rousey and all of her whack as shit coaches come from. Because all right, I'll break down my position on that real fast too. Is that if anyone thinks Ronda Rousey has good coaches, you're off your fucking rocker. Okay, the reason being is she came in as a judoka, a gold or bronze medalist in the Olympics, and was throwing girls to the ground and getting them submissions. Yeah, makes sense. That's what a judoka should do.
And they tried to turn into a striker.
Right, and not only that, the coaches then went on to tell her, your striking is amazing. You should definitely strike with Amanda Nunes, blah, 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 blah. How the fuck did that go for her? Okay?
Yeah, how does that go for anybody, which is the point of bad coaching rather than bad fighting on Ronda's part. Because, if you're advising your fighter to stand and bang with Amanda Nunes,
don't do that.
I don't know how much film you were watching. I feel you there.
Unless your fighter's name is Valentina Shevchenko, don't do that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But
sure,
my point being is that Edmen, he's 23, super young to be where he's at in the UFC.
Yeah.
I think he got the Ronda Rousey treatment from being Ronda Rousey's little protege in their gym. I don't think it has anything to do with how good he is.
Well, and he's another prime example. He is the example. Unfortunately, I don't take pride in talking about how his career is not going how people thought it would go, but it's not going. The fact of the matter is, it's not going how a lot of people, probably including himself, thought it was going to go. And you heard me a second ago on the last one we were talking about the early prelims, the debut of Ian Gary, and I said I think they should maybe give him a little bit of a slow build. And this is the reason why, is guys like Shahbazyan. That's when it goes bad and you rush these guys and give them too much too fast. It's
that balloon's broken, bro. We can't, at this point, I can't fix Shahbazyan's balloon. He's 3 losses in a row. His record is 11-3. He was undefeated. They tried to steamroll him to undefeated top. You don't do that, man. You know who they did the best build of all time with? Usman. Because they never worked to build him, not once. And he just had to do it on his own throughout his whole career. And now he's 15-0 in the UFC.
We also, we saw what happened with Islam. We've been claiming.
I think Islam's a mistake, too. I think that's a mistake. We'll get to it at the start of the main card, but I think what they're doing to Islam is a mistake.
I like that.
The UFC's desperate for a star right now, man. They're desperate. But they don't need to be. They're not appreciating what they have. I have a big problem with the UFC currently and the way they promote people.
Okay. All interesting. Very interesting takes here. But so we can all agree that, Shahbazyan is kind of like a cautionary tale of the mishandling of a young phenom hotshot prospect.
Absolutely.
We can all, and then Imavov,
quite the opposite, in fact.
A guy that said yes a lot of times. isn't perfect. I think he has one loss inside the UFC. So, I mean, maybe that's why they kind of slowed us. But this was a big fight for him. Like, I mean, they gave him a guy with a big number and a well-known name. I mean, this was – I think he's the kind of a guy that's like, okay, he paid his dues, 4 or 5 fights of lesser-known guys. Now they're, like, giving him a step up.
Absolutely. I think they recognized Imavov's skill on his Ian Heinisch win.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up Heinisch, because Heinisch is a guy, like when you hear like MMA pundits talk about Heinisch, you would think they're talking about Hamza. Like he's very highly regarded, and Imavov ran through him like a hot knife through butter. So I think that forced the UFC's hand of like, okay, do we have something here? Let's find out.
Well, and I won't give you anything about the next matchup, but Phil Hawes and Imavov have fought before, and it was a super good fight. Majority decision, which I actually scored as a split. Or I scored as a draw on that fight. Because one judge did have a draw, 2 judges had Phil Hawes, and I actually thought that Imavov did enough to get that to be a draw.
I don't remember how I scored it, but I definitely trust your recollection. You know?
It was a crazy fight. We both agreed crazy fight. We actually had it pinned up as beforehand, one that could be fight of the night. I don't think we were off on saying that after seeing how the scoring came out and how close it was. But we'll stick with this fight because Phil Hawes is the next fight. So we can actually talk about that in tandem when we get to the next fight.
Yeah, for sure, man. How did you score? I thought round 1 was actually, I mean, for as much shit as we talked about him as Shahbazyan and as much as we've stroked off Imavov, I thought round 1 was actually really hard to score, really competitive, kind of another tale of two halves. That kept happening.
It was weird, right? Because I thought Shahbazyan started out and looked great. And then I thought Imavov started to realize, like, these are sequences in which I can catch him. Got the guillotine attempts kind of super deep, but, like, enough where Shahbazyan could survive them.
I thought honestly, he was out, like, twice. There was, like, 2 different times I thought he was toast. So, I mean, I'll be real. As a guy who's been pretty down on Shahbazyan, that was a nice little check mark of, like, okay, he hasn't mailed it in. He still has, you know, the heart. He's still competing. He's still trying. Like, he's not down on himself. Like, he still believes in himself. Like, because that was 2 opportunities that he could have got out of there and got his check and gone home. But he got out of them.
Man, what sucks for Shahbazyan is when you look at his loss to Derek Brunson or his most recent loss, which was to let me make sure I don't misquote this here, which was to Jack Hermanson. It's like,
those are tough losses. I mean, those are good fighters.
And it's a decision against Hermanson and a round 3 finish from Brunson. So it's like, I can't really say that your heart was even in question there.
No, you're right.
And it wasn't in question in this fight.
It wasn't in question.
However,
yeah, you're right.
The skill set is in question. We're not going to, like, how hard Shahbazyan fights and trains, and according to even DC, when he stepped out to AKA and went and trained there, and now this is the part that struck me, and the reason I say that he needs to leave his gym and completely disassociate with Ronda Rousey and all those people, is apparently they called DC and AKA and the coaches out there were like, hey, and they call him Little Ed. They're like, we want to bring Little Ed out here, like, teach him some wrestling. Like, we want to bring him to you guys. You're the best on the planet at it, blah, blah, blah. He says, cool. Apparently, Edmen Shahbazyan shows up, works hard, like, never skips a workout, like, puts all the work in. And they're like, this kid's, like, down to work. Get him a good coach then, man. Whoever his coach is from Ronda Rousey's gym, that dude's shit, man. He's dog water, all right? Like, he's what my dog drinks out of his bowl.
Fair point. Fair point, yeah. But I got to say, Imavov, he was able to get up, and he was able to end the round strong. I still have round 1 10-9 Shahbazyan, but it made it, what made it tough is how strong Imavov ended the round. And while it wasn't enough, in my opinion, to steal the round, I did think it was some foreshadowing.
So I actually scored it to Imavov.
Oh, wow.
But I wrote in my notes, I could definitely be wrong. I just felt that I literally wrote, I feel the tide turning. Like, I think I projected scores.
Shahbazyan actually was able to take down Imavov, which I don't think anybody saw coming. So that was another thing that Shahbazyan did well.
And he escaped the guillotine super proficiently, but he was stuck in it for a good 30 seconds before he finally was able to escape. And, like, I'm probably wrong in my scoring in this round, I'll be honest. I just felt the tide. I felt the tide switching. And, like, I think my overall feeling led me – led me to a 10-9 for Imavov because I was like, I think this wave is, like, way too big to ignore.
Hey, it ends up not mattering. This fight doesn't last throughout the second round. Man, he was the second round was a domination. The first round was close and competitive and hard to
First
score on the
round
ground.
was probably Shahbazyan's, but like arguably Imavov's. Second round was not even close.
Yeah, Imavov was able to figure out something, whatever it was that he figured out. I mean, it was all domination. He ends it after some more deep submission attempts. Like, I mean, credit to Shahbazyan, he was not tapping to those. He was able to get the crucifix, get him in the crucifix position, and then just drop elbows. And the no nonsense. Keith Peterson had a little nonsense. I thought that went on a little long. I mean, when a guy's in a crucifix, by definition, you can't intelligently defend. So I mean, he let him eat a lot of bows. But hey,
I agree. But with 8 seconds to go in the round, it's like, can this guy just like buck his hips enough to like keep this guy off balance,
okay,
where like
fair.
maybe he can survive? Now, granted, at that point in the fight, that wasn't happening. Like, Shahbazyan had tried everything he could do at that point, had his arm fully locked up, and it was over.
It was over. And then even if he did survive the round, that was definitely on his way to a 10-8. So, I mean, the fight was just – Imavov took over from round 2 on. I mean, like, Shahbazyan was able to be very competitive in the first round, have a lot of bright spots in the first round. But Imavov outlasted him, figured him out, figured out the puzzle, downloaded it, as you said earlier, and was able to get the victory in round 2. Shout out to everybody watching on our Instagram right now. But yeah, Nassourdine Imavov, very impressive. Minus 120 victory. I mean, he beat the number 11 guy. I mean, that's got to get him in the top 10 or close to it.
I mean, funny enough, to bring up rankings, I thought what he said about rankings was pretty wildly accurate last night.
What did he say?
He pretty much said, if this guy's 11, I need 5 through 10 next, and closer to 5 because my skill set's clearly better than this guy, is essentially what he said, which can't disagree with. Now, that would be him jumping Kevin Holland and Chris Weidman, and I don't agree with all that because I think that his stylistic matchup aided him here. But what were you going to say?
I'm not convinced Chris Weidman's not retired, and B,
same.
I was just saying that, like, I'll be real. We were stock down on Shahbazyan, so how much stock do we give for beating Shahbazyan? But that's us. I mean, the fact of the matter is that he beat the number 11 guy in the division, but we both felt like the number 11 guy in the division was ranked too high, and we weren't high on him, and we would have probably, picked Kevin Holland or any of those other guys around that guy over him. So, yeah, I don't know. It's tough. The middleweight rankings are weird, but yeah, I mean, Imavov's definitely ranked now, and I think he's as interesting as any other new middleweight, right? I mean, that division needs a little life. I mean,
needs a lot of life. Middleweight's dying. It's a dying weight.
The Gastelums, the Tills. I mean, even though Brunson's having a lot of success, I mean, he's not the most exciting guy. He's definitely not a shiny new toy. He's been around the block forever. I mean, the whole Costa situation. I mean, Vittori, we kind of know where he stands, even though he is, definitely top 5. But yeah, middleweight could definitely use some young killers, some young lions for sure.